Most mornings in Windmarsh began the same: gray skies, gulls cackling like old women, and the scent of brine drifting through crooked alleyways. The sea never really slept here, it only shifted its weight, breathing fog in and out like an old man with a slow lung. Oliver Thorne opened his tea shop at exactly 6:47 a.m. every day. Never 6:45, that would be eager. Never 6:50, that would be careless. Some said Oliver had come back from the sea after losing something. Others said he'd never left Windmarsh in his life. Both stories felt true when you looked at him long enough. Hazel Griggs, age 7, full-time chatterbox, part-time inventor of invisible friends, burst in with a backpack and an untied shoelace. He pulled open the warped wooden shutters of thorn and leaf, brushed yesterday's loose petals off the counter, she chirped, flinging her damp mittens onto the counter like a magician performing a trick, and lit the old copper kettle beneath its permanent place on the stovetop. Everything had its rhythm here. The chipped mugs faced left. The sugar cubes lived in a jar labeled kindness, and a cat named Pickle had claimed the tartan armchair in the corner before Oliver ever paid the deposit on the building. For the next 10 minutes, she recited an elaborate dream involving flying toast and a duck wearing a monocle. Oliver nodded along, stirring cocoa and arranging loose-leaf jars for the day. Oliver asked, already reaching for her favorite chipped mug, the one with the cat chasing a moon. He wore the same charcoal cardigan every day. It had patches on the elbows and a scent like bergamot and salt. His hair was dark and damp, but his eyes were searching like he'd forgotten what he was looking for halfway through the journey. Outside, the fog pressed against the windows like a curious child. At 7 I'm sharp, the bell over the door jingled. "Morning, Mr. Thorne," came a breathless voice. "I heard this place makes a tea for clarity." People came for many reasons: heartbreak, insomnia, hangovers, or just a place to sit without needing to talk. But the ones who came looking for clarity always wore that same lost expression, half hope, half apology. Hot cocoa with cinnamon. She did this every Tuesday, claiming the mug helped her math skills. Oliver had yet to test that scientifically. That's like saying you don't like books. You just haven't met the right one yet. "Where's Pickle?" she asked. "Still in conference with the armchair," Oliver replied. "Big decisions." He called it the stillness blend designed not to solve problems, but to give people space for the answers already floating around inside them. Hazel giggled and tucked herself onto the stool near the cash register. At 7:13 a.m., Hazel's mother arrived, apologizing in whispers, and the little whirlwind vanished in a puff of cold air and marshmallow breath. Pickle stretched, yawned, and decided the newcomer wasn't a threat. Then, at 7:29 a.m., a stranger arrived. He didn't fit Windmarsh. He just sat for a long time, letting the warmth wrap around him like something familiar. Where most wore layers and rain boots, this man wore thin linen and shoes better suited for city pavement than cobblestone and puddles. Oliver glanced up as the bell jingled. "Morning," the man said. "Might be. Depending who you ask," Oliver replied. The man smiled. Oliver studied him. "I've got a few blends that might help," Oliver said gently. The man hesitated. "I don't really like tea." Oliver didn't blink. That made the man smile. "All right. Surprise me." Oliver nodded, moved silently among the jars, and selected a soft blend of white tea, elderflower, and a pinch of dried pear. He served it in a plain blue mug and said nothing more. The man took a sip, then paused. "This tastes like a memory I forgot I had." Oliver wiped the counter with slow, precise movements. "Sometimes that's all it takes." The man didn't say more. Outside, the fog began to lift. Inside, the clock ticked softly. Oliver didn't ask for names, not yet. He knew the tea would do the talking first. The man returned the next morning, right at 7:29, same shoes. Same hesitant steps. Same uncertain glance at the menu, as though it might have rearranged itself overnight. Oliver didn't say a word. He simply reached for the blue mug. "I figured you'd forget me," the man said, sliding onto the same stool Hazel had occupied the day before. "The tea remembers." "I don't forget faces," Oliver replied, scooping the blend without looking. Even the usual clinking of spoons and rustle of newspapers had taken a day off. The fog outside was thinner, pale, and scattered like cotton candy left out in the rain, especially ones that look like they're still mid-conversation with themselves. The man smiled again, but it was a tired smile, one that folded in the corners like a letter carried too long in a pocket. "You remembered the blend." Oliver slid the steaming cup across the counter. The shop was quieter this morning. In the middle of a boat, the sea was full of teacups. The man sipped, slower this time. There was a cat, sitting on a stack of books. "I had the strangest dream last night," he said. "Sounds prophetic," Oliver said, wiping a non-existent crumb from the counter. "It was probably just the elderflower. Possibly." Oliver leaned on the bar. He opened it and turned to a page filled with faded ink, smudged sketches. "Good tea, I'll give you. Old magic. Well, depends who's brewing." And what looked like coordinates. He used to say that some shops don't just serve tea. They serve moments, ones that change you, that you don't realize are important until after. Or maybe you're getting somewhere. Told me it was a map of places he visited before I was born. Places with good tea and old magic. Windmarsh was marked with a star, hand-dipped, fickle stuff. Bleeds if you breathe too hard, letting the steam and stillness work its way into the cracks between words. Right after I spilled orange juice on it in 2006, then, curious, he finally asked, "The shop tends to offer what people need, even if they don't know what they be missing. What brings you to Windmarsh, really?" "I think I'm supposed to find something here. Or maybe I already did." The kind of quiet that didn't ask questions, didn't push for answers. It just was. "I'm not sure. Getting where?" "No offense to fortune cookies, but this tea's better. Same blend. But maybe with a little more clarity this time?" "That's for the tea to decide." The man blinked, then laughed. "You always speak like that?" A woman walked in with raindrops clinging to her sleeves and poetry in her posture. She glanced around, paused at the sight of the stranger, swirling like whispers from some forgotten tide. Oliver thought, perhaps this one's found his moment after all, and then walked to the corner booth without a word. Oliver considered, only when the customer's listening. He let that hang in the air for a moment. The man hesitated. "I guess I'm following a map." Oliver raised an eyebrow. The man reached into his satchel and pulled out something that looked like a weathered journal. Something about her made him straighten. "My grandfather left this to me," he said. Oliver tilted his head. The man shrugged. "That," Oliver said, "sounds like something worth finding." He leaned over the map, studying the smudges. "I haven't seen ink like this in years," he murmured. "It bled," the man admitted. Oliver chuckled. Pickle, sensing interest but refusing to leave her chair, gave a disapproving yawn. The man tucked the map away and turned serious. Oliver nodded thoughtfully, as if consulting some invisible internal compass. "Well," he said, "whether it's tea, time, or a cat with strange opinions." The man looked up. "That's very fortune cookie of you." Oliver smiled faintly. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes. At 8:03, the bell jingled again. The man followed her with his eyes. Oliver noticed. "More tea," he offered. Oliver thought, perhaps this one's found his moment after all. The man hesitated, then nodded. Oliver didn't smile, but his eyes did. "Coming right up." And as the tea leaves danced in the water, swirling like whispers from some forgotten tide, Oliver thought, perhaps this one's found his moment after all. She came in every Thursday, always at 8:03 a.m., always alone, and always sat in a booth beneath the fog-stained painting of Windmarsh Harbor. Oliver had never asked her name. He never asked unless someone offered, but he denamed her Moss in his mind. Not because she was quiet, though she was, but because she had a stillness that reminded him of forest stones and shady paths. He simply placed a second mug of tea, same blend, same blue ceramic on the counter in front of him. Places that were old and kind and didn't need noise to mean something. The man noticed her the second she entered. Not in the clumsy way that said, "I'm looking for someone," but in the soft, surprised way that said, "There you are." Oliver said nothing. "She always orders chamomile," Oliver said, voice low. The man blinked, and yet he didn't recognize her, not in the literal sense, but something inside him insisted he should. Let it do its work. And yet this morning feels like a white tea and wonder sort of day. "New house blend," Oliver said, placing it gently in front of her. Her eyes weren't wide, but they saw too much, like she was always 10 seconds ahead of the conversation. "Just met it yesterday, actually. It's more persuasive than I expected." Oliver's teas have a way of convincing even the skeptics. "On the house. I know. I saw you yesterday." He carried the mug to her table before the man could say anything more. "I was probably just wondering if I'd made a mistake coming here. I've never argued with a good cup. Now I'm wondering if maybe I was supposed to." She looked up, startled. "But I didn't order. I work at the paper. The fog cleared just enough to see you sitting here. Look like someone deep in thought. Slowly, like someone dragging thoughts out of a fog. It's a tea that finds you when you need it," Oliver said, tapping the side of the mug lightly. She tilted her head, studied him, then the tea, and finally smiled. The man stayed where he was, unsure whether to approach or not, but something about her presence tugged at him like a familiar song. She pulled out a small notebook and began writing. Things moved slowly here, even the revelations. After 5 minutes, the man stood. He walked over to her table with all the confidence of someone doing something absolutely terrifying and trying to pretend it wasn't tea. "Mind if I sit?" he asked. She looked up, blinking again. She nodded to the seat across from her. "Tea fan too?" He smiled, easing into the booth, and neither realizing how long they'd stay, she gave a quiet chuckle. "I'm Eli," he said. "I'm new here." She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. That startled him. "You did? I was across the street." He laughed softly. She sipped her tea, then looked at him. "And now?" He considered. She closed her notebook, then looked at him properly. "I'm Nora." Their handshake was a brief, warm thing that didn't try to be more than it was. That was part of Windmarsh, too. Back behind the counter, Oliver wiped his hands on a clean towel and watched through the glass jar of dried lemon balm. Pickle stretched again, tail flicking once like a bookmark. 2 cups of tea, 1 map, and a woman who always came in at 8:03. Outside, the fog thinned just enough for a sunbeam to slip through the cloud cover and scatter across the cobblestone street. The sea exhaled in the distance. Eli and Nora sat together in the little shop by the harbor, both pretending they were just there for the tea. Not yet. But the leaves always knew first. 3 days later, Oliver found Eli on the back porch, staring out at the tide with a puzzled expression and a small tin box in his lap. It was early, barely past 7, and Windmarsh still wore her morning layers, mist, salt, and silence. "You know," Oliver said as he stepped outside with 2 mugs of lemon thyme tea, "most people use chairs. I don't remember packing it." Eli was seated cross-legged on the wooden deck, bare feet on the cold boards, squinting at the sea like it had spoken, and he was trying to translate. "I couldn't sleep," Eli said, taking the offered mug, "and then I found this in my bag." Oliver sat beside him without question. Dented on one side, rusted gently on the corners, a small brass latch held it shut. The tin box was no larger than a paperback. "May I?" Oliver asked. Eli handed it over. Oliver opened the latch slowly, like one might open an old locket. Inside were several yellowed photographs, all black and white, their edges curled. One showed a tea shop that looked suspiciously like this one, but older, simpler. The porch was still there, the sign above the door worn with time, the Windmarsh leaf. He used to say the best journeys begin with no instructions. I think this shop was one of his places. They do not follow maps, only memories, but I'd never opened it before. I thought it was just coins or something. Oliver raised a brow. "Your grandfather leave this too? It looks like you." About a man who came from the fog and knew things he shouldn't have known. About stars and machines and lightning in his pocket. Eli nodded. Beneath the photographs was a small stack of hand-torn notes, ink faded, paper feathered. Left behind only a tin box and a recipe for peach tea. Oliver pulled one free and read aloud. "Peach tea is hard to get right. Flattering, but unlikely. I've only been here, 15 years. Took over from someone else. The leaf has had many keepers. Some places exist between heartbeats." He looked up. "Your grandfather had a poetic streak." Eli's expression was unreadable. "A little mystery is good for business." Oliver returned the note to the tin. Eli looked down at the photograph again. I looked it up. The man from the story? He was real, or at least someone claimed to be him. His name was Ellis Faulkner. Arrived in Windmarsh in 1934. Said he came from a different Win, not a different where. Oliver smiled. "Do they all brew like you? Drew machines no one understood. Claimed to have seen the world end and begin again. I'd like to think not." The tide sighed and shifted. "I showed Nora the map," Eli said suddenly. "Yesterday." Oliver kept his face neutral, and she told me it reminded her of a story her grandmother used to tell. Careful with names. They have a way of calling things home. Oliver chuckled. "Sounds dramatic." Apparently, he disappeared into the sea one morning. Oliver looked at him over his mug. She said her grandmother was in love with him. Silence again, not the kind that demands answers, but the kind that waits for them. "You think it's the same man?" Eli asked. Oliver tapped his mug. "Does it matter?" Eli considered. "It might. If I'm retracing his path." Oliver stood, brushing off his hands. "Then you'll need two things." Eli looked up. "Tea and a reason to stay," Oliver said, heading inside. That afternoon, a gentle rain came and painted the windows with watercolors. Nora arrived later than usual, her coat soaked, her cheeks flushed from running. "I didn't want to miss the light," she said, sliding into her usual booth. Eli joined her, this time without asking. She slid a folded piece of paper across the table. "That's not ominous at all," Eli muttered. "He was a tinkerer." Eli leaned back. "My grandfather's name was Faulkner." She raised an eyebrow. "Coincidence?" "I'm starting to think this whole town runs on those." Oliver brought over their tea, Nora's usual chamomile. Eli's now officially the blend. As he set the cups down, he added. Eli looked at Nora, then back at the tin box on the counter. "Maybe that's what I'm doing," he said. "Calling something home?" Nora smiled faintly. "Maybe it's calling you back." The old grandfather clock in the corner hadn't ticked in years. It stood like a sentinel near the window, draped in dust and quiet, its face faded. Its hands stuck at 4:17 a time no one in the shop could ever remember reaching. Pickle, the cat, often slept beneath it, as though guarding something forgotten. Oliver never wound it. He claimed it was more honest that way. But today, as Eli went to shelve a fresh batch of tea tins, something shifted. A gust of wind rattled the glass from the back door, just enough to nudge the leaning frame of the clock. And inside, something fell. A soft flutter, a whisper of paper, a sound like memory landing. Eli turned, frowning. He opened the small wooden hatch beneath the clock's face and peered in. There, balanced delicately across a rusted coil, was an envelope. No name, no date. Just a symbol, an hourglass drawn in thick black ink, with vines curling around it like roots trying to hold back time. Oliver glanced up as Eli placed it on the counter. "Where'd you find that?" "Clock dropped it," Eli said. "Strange, I haven't opened that hatch in 10 years. Oliver's brow furrowed slightly. The envelope was brittle at the corners. Eli opened it carefully, sliding out a folded page, a note scribbled in the same hand as the messages from the tin box. "When the clock forgets to move, the moment becomes a door." The moment Nora touched it, something odd happened. Its hands shivered. A faint mechanical click echoed from deep inside, like an old breath being drawn. Eli looked at Oliver. "Is this one of yours?" Name was Alice Faulkner. She read it twice, then looked toward the clock. Bit of a recluse, her umbrella barely holding up. She saw the note in Eli's hands and paused. The wind pressed gently against the windows, as if trying to peek in. The three of them sat in the quiet, the lights turned low, sipping tea that smelled like orange peel and pine needles. Spoken riddles smelled like cedarwood and salt. "He lived here a long time ago, right where you're standing now." Oliver shook his head slowly. Maybe he was lonely. Or maybe he found something and didn't want to face it alone. Maybe he wanted someone to find the pieces he left behind. "No, I used to think stories happened to other people. Adventurers, chosen ones, heroes." And inside the shop, something, whether time, memory, or magic, clicked into place. "But I know who wrote it." He tapped the counter. Eli felt his pulse flicker. "He's my grandfather." Oliver's eyes didn't widen, but his silence deepened. "I think he left me something to follow," Eli said. Nora arrived just then, damp from the wind. "Another one?" she asked. He nodded, passing it to her. "What if it's literal?" she asked. "What if—" "The moment is a door," Eli chuckled. "I've opened stranger things." Together, they returned to the grandfather clock. "Did you see that?" Nora asked. "It moved," Eli whispered. "It actually moved." The hands now pointed to 4:18. Oliver appeared behind them with a steaming mug. "Sometimes things wait for the right people." "Or the right time," Nora added. They stared at the clock in silence. Later that evening, Nora stayed behind. "Why do you think he left all these notes?" Eli asked. Oliver shrugged. Nora looked at the clock again. Pickle curled up in the crook of Oliver's arm. Eli took a deep breath and leaned back. "And now?" Nora asked. He glanced at her. "Now I'm starting to think stories happen to whoever shows up with an open heart." Outside, the rain turned soft and misty again, blurring the glass like watercolor on canvas. And inside the shop, something, whether time, memory, or magic, clicked into place. It was Sunday morning when Nora noticed the photograph. The air still held a trace of chamomile and clove from the early rush. The regulars had trickled out, bellies warm and moods gentled. And a framed photograph Oliver claimed had been there since he moved in. Oliver hummed faintly from the back room. Pickle napped across a sunbeam, and Eli wiped the counter with absent circles. Nora had wandered over to the shelf by the window, the one lined with faded books, dusty trinkets, same curved awning, same crooked windows, same brass bell over the door. But in front stood 3 people, except she swore it hadn't been. It showed the tea shop from decades ago. 2 were women dressed in vintage skirts, laughing mid-motion, their hair caught in a gust. Between them stood a man in a dark coat and wide-brimmed hat, his face turned slightly toward the camera. "Oliver," she called, pointing at the frame. "The photo, of course." No label, no date, but scribbled in pencil was a single line. He leaned in. That's him." It hit the floor with a thud. Oliver picked it up and unrolled it, revealing the hand-drawn star map again now with faint red ink added, circling a small point labeled the rooted place. "Was this always here? It's like he's watching me." Nora held a flashlight and Oliver brought a thermos of tea. You sure? I could have sworn he was always in it. He emerged, wiping his hands on his apron. Eli carried the map. No, she said. The man. He wasn't there before. Past the old stone bridge and down a slope of moss-covered steps. It was small, almost secret. A grove surrounded by willows, their branches swaying like sighs. Eli walked over, eyes narrowing. Oliver tilted his head. Who? My grandfather, Eli whispered. That's Ellis Faulkner. And the women? Nora asked. Then he smiled, which means it's perfect. Eli looked at her. No idea. Oliver frowned, but he didn't sound sure anymore. Nora lifted the frame and turned it over. There are photographs that wait for you to see them. I don't like this, Eli muttered. Or guiding you, Nora said. Pickle stretched and knocked a rolled-up map off a nearby shelf. Not a bell, not a phone, just a sound like something opening. A door, perhaps, or a clock. Nora tapped it. That wasn't there before. I didn't add it, Eli said. I swear. Silence fell over the three of them. Finally, Oliver said, I think this is an invitation. To what? Eli asked. To the next chapter, he replied. They left after closing. The rain had paused, the sky a bruised lavender. The rooted place turned out to be a glen just outside the village. At the center stood a single wooden bench, facing nothing in particular. Eli sat down first. It's quiet, he said. Too quiet, Oliver added. Nora knelt near the roots of the largest willow. There's something carved here. They leaned in. In the bark, worn smooth by time, were the words. This is where I heard her laugh again. This is where I remembered my name. Eli's voice caught. That's his handwriting. They sat there as the light dimmed, listening to wind and silence. I think this was his safe place, Nora whispered. Eli nodded. I think it's mine now too. Oliver poured the tea, steam curling into the night like rising memory. As they sipped, a soft chime rang somewhere in the trees. Nora said it first. The moment became a door. Eli closed his eyes. And for a second, just a second, he thought he heard a voice whisper his name through the willows. The next morning, something was wrong with the tea. Not the flavor, no. The flavor was perfect. A gentle blend of white jasmine and green pear, with a whisper of spearmint underneath. It wasn't burnt or steeped too long. It was balanced. But it wouldn't stop vanishing. Eli had poured himself a mug, placed it on the table, and turned for a second to open his journal. When he looked back, the cup was empty, not spilled. Not sipped, just gone. He blinked, turned the mug upside down. Nothing inside. Oliver, he called, half laughing. Did you switch my tea with a magic trick? Oliver leaned around the shelf, brow raised. Not recently. Nora, sitting by the window, lowered her own mug and said, Check the counter. Eli glanced over. There sat a second cup of the same blend full. Steam curling upward like a beckoning hand. He walked to it cautiously. Is this mine? He asked. Oliver shrugged. It is now. He took a sip, same taste. Warm, delicate. But this time, he didn't look away. He watched it carefully. And then, even while watching, the tea slowly faded before his eyes, as though the cup were draining into thin air. He set the mug down fast. Oliver stepped closer, lips tight in thought. That's not vanishing. That's memory tea. What? Oliver turned to the tin shelf and pulled down an unlabeled canister. I haven't used this in years. It's not meant for sipping casually. But then shadows, blurred images, the sound of wind chimes. This blend only appears when someone's on the edge of remembering something they buried too deep. Nora stood. Why would it choose him? A low, rumbling laugh, or stars? Eli rubbed the back of his neck. Maybe because I'm trying to remember my grandfather, but for being kind when no one else was. Oliver opened the tin and held it out. The leaves were dark green, almost shimmering in the light, but dried to a crisp edge. They didn't smell like anything. "You have to drink it again," Oliver said. "But this time, close your eyes. Don't look at the cup. Let the memory take shape." Eli hesitated. Nora touched his arm. "You're not alone." He took a deep breath, then picked up the mug. Eyes closed. Sip. At first, nothing. Only warmth, the taste of something faintly sweet. A kitchen, not this one. A smaller, dimly lit space with cracked tile and yellow wallpaper. A man sitting at the table. The same wide-brimmed hat. "You ever think," the man said, "that the best things in life are meant to disappear, like steam?" Eli's heart ached. "Your name," the man continued, "will mean something." "Not for being famous." Eli opened his eyes. He was still in the shop, but his cheeks were wet. "I remember him," he whispered. "I was only 6, but I remember his voice." Oliver took the cup and nodded. "It's enough." Nora passed him a napkin without saying anything. Outside, the fog thickened again, curling around the windows like wool. But Eli felt lighter. Something had shifted. And the cup, though empty, felt full in his hands. The next clue didn't fall from the ceiling or whisper from the kettle. It arrived tucked inside the pages of an overdue library book. Nora had borrowed the history of lesser-known plants 3 weeks ago. She only cracked it open again that afternoon when she noticed a sprig of something dry and silvery pressed between the pages. "It smells like eucalyptus and pencil shavings." Curious, she brought it to the shop. "That's not eucalyptus. That's silverleaf. Only grows in one place around here, Gracie's Grove." "I swear this wasn't here before," she said, setting it gently on the counter. "Point is, someone pressed this here for a reason." Oliver leaned in, sniffed, and nodded. "Gracie who?" Eli asked. "Gracie Tilling. Local legend, hermit, tea alchemist. Lived in a cottage that vanished after the flood of 72. Some say she left a journal behind. Others say she was the journal." Eli raised an eyebrow. "What does that even mean?" He simply reached under the counter and retrieved a weathered journal. He handed it to them without ceremony. Oliver shrugged. "Depends who you ask." The woman could speak 6 languages and once brewed a tea. Inside, pages and pages of neatly scrawled entries, recipes, reflections, and what appeared to be letters. To Eli, none were dated. Eli flipped to it. At the top was a sketch of a cabin tucked into a glade, with the word Gracie's Grove scribbled underneath. Most started the same way, for the moment you'd need it. He handed them a paper map, edges frayed, trails hand-drawn. That made a man confess to painting a neighbor's fence just so he could watch it dry. Oliver stayed behind, holding the photograph of the 3 people from the window shelf. Nora rolled her eyes. She flipped the page again, and that's when she saw it. Written in delicate fountain pen ink was a message at the top of the chapter. "The answers bloom where the questions begin. Return to where the names were first spoken." Below that, circled in faded pencil, were 2 names, Elijah and Nora. Eli stared at it. "That's my full name." "Mine too," Nora whispered, "middle and first." Oliver didn't say anything. "Belonged to your grandfather," he said. "Wait, you had this the whole time?" Eli asked. "I was waiting," Oliver replied. The cover was soft leather, scuffed at the edges, with a pressed tea leaf in the center. "If you're reading this, it means you followed the leaves." There was an entry marked with a tea stain. "Looks like we've got a hike ahead," Nora said, already pulling out her phone for directions. "No signal in that part of the woods," Oliver said. "You'll need this." As they packed a small bag, Pickle padded over and batted at the map, landing her paw right on the grove. "I guess that's settled," Eli said. They left just before sunset, the sky painted in streaks of apricot and lavender. Nora carried the journal, Eli the map. He looked at the man in the wide-brimmed hat and whispered, "They're ready." As they disappeared down the path, the tea shop settled back into its soft stillness. Only the grandfather clock ticked slow and steady for the first time in years. The trail to Gracie's grove wound like a ribbon through the forest, dappled in soft orange light. Eli and Nora walked in companionable quiet, the kind that didn't require filling. Every so often, a robin would flit ahead as if guiding them, and the trees swayed in a rhythm that made even the wind seem deliberate. They followed the hand-drawn map, careful not to miss the turnoff just past a twisted oak that looked remarkably like a pretzel. "There," Nora said, pointing to a tree marked with 3 slashes in the bark. The path narrowed, brush hugging their legs and wet leaves slicked beneath their boots. The air smelled of pine needles and something sweet, almost like honey but lighter, like a memory you can't place. In the center stood a moss-covered stone cottage, slouched slightly to the left like it had been napping for decades. That's either a threat or the best motto ever. Ivy curled around its windows, and a crook sign dangled from a bent nail near the door. It wasn't long before they reached the grove. A single candle burned there, though no one had lit it. Shelves lined the walls, filled with glass jars, loose herbs, books without titles, and tiny wooden boxes carved with stars, but not one she had ever seen before. Instead of a wick, it held a silver tea leaf suspended inside, and the flame glowed around it without touching it. Gracie's grove wasn't vast, it was more like a pocket in the world, carved out for quiet. Nora brushed the sign off with her sleeve. "Leave your worries at the kettle," Eli grinned. The door creaked open when he knocked, not locked, just waiting. Just stood there, quiet. Inside, the cottage smelled of chamomile, cedarwood, and something dusty and warm like old paperbacks. At the back sat a writing desk. Nora stepped forward and spotted a strange object hanging from a hook above the desk, a lantern made entirely of glass. Below it, a note. "The lantern of listening, speak not to be heard." Listen to be spoken to? They stared at each other. Then Eli said, "You first. The symbol was on my grandfather's journal." Inside lay a small cloth pouch with 3 smooth stones, each painted with a symbol, a teacup, an eye, and a star. Nora laughed. Of course. She cleared her throat and said nothing. The lantern flickered, and then, softly, a voice rose from within. It sounded like wind in a tunnel, like a whisper stretched over time. As Eli approached, the teacup stone in Nora's hand began to warm. "One of you carries questions. The other carries keys." The flame danced. Wind curled around them in greeting. And far ahead, in the center of a clearing, stood a stone table. "You cannot unlock the past alone." Then it faded. Eli stepped forward. "What does it mean?" But the lantern remained silent. Nora turned to the desk and opened one of the drawers. Eli picked up the star. "Then maybe it's a wayfinder," she said. "Like, where to go next?" At the far end of the cottage, they found a second door, low and round, made of the same glass as the lantern. "I think we're supposed to go through," he said. "Even if we don't know what's on the other side?" she asked. He smiled, nervous. "Isn't that kind of the point?" Together, they pushed the door open. What met them wasn't darkness, but a garden. Massive and alive, shimmering under twilight stars. The air felt thicker, more aware. Flowers turned as they stepped through. On it, 3 cups of tea, steaming as though poured just seconds ago. Eli blinked. "We're expected." "Then let's not be rude," Nora said. They walked forward uninvited but unmistakably welcomed. And as they approached, something about the tea shimmered gold in the starlight, like memory trying to take shape again. Each teacup on the stone table bore a different symbol, a crescent moon, an open eye, and a small tree with roots curling beneath it. Eli instinctively reached for the cup with the open eye. The handle fit his hand like it had been waiting just for him, holding the one with the crescent moon. "We don't know what these will do." "Wait," Nora said softly. "True," Eli replied, "but when has that ever stopped us?" They clinked cups quietly. The third cup, tree-rooted, untouched, continued to steam on its own, patiently. Eli took a sip. No, not quite. Something deeper. Then, suddenly, everything around him disappeared. One day, I'll show them. I'll make something that matters. This wasn't his memory, but it felt like it belonged to someone, his bloodline, his grandfather, great-grandfather. At first, it was floral, maybe lavender. He was not in the garden anymore, with wallpaper the color of dusk and curtains drawn shut. Dust motes hung in the air, and not being afraid of what they lead to. In front of him, a boy, maybe 10 years old, sat hunched over a desk, scrawling something into a notebook. He stood inside a dimly lit room. The boy turned slightly, just enough for Eli to see his face. It wasn't him, and yet the moment felt familiar. The tea inside had turned pale silver. Not me, a boy. Do you think we're supposed to drink it too? He was working so hard, like he was trying to prove something. The boy muttered to himself. Eli's chest tightened. I saw a woman planting tea leaves in rows. She whispered to them like they were her children. And she laughed when they grew crooked, said the bent ones always tasted better. Branches leaned inward, and flowers turned their faces toward the center table. The boy turned fully now and looked straight at him. As he peered into the cup, he noticed a faint reflection, not his own, but of a man wearing a wide-brimmed hat. You listening? He asked. Eli could only nod. Then remember this. It's not about knowing all the answers. It's about asking the right questions. The room began to dissolve, and the scent of the tea rose again, pulling Eli back into the garden. He gasped as his eyes opened. Nora studied him. You okay? He looked down at the cup. I saw someone, he said. Nora nodded. They both turned to the third cup. Still steaming, Eli glanced at the trees. Before Nora could answer, a breeze stirred the trees, and a voice, faint but real, drifted through the garden. Not yet. They froze. Then the garden shifted. Subtly, the trees began to sway, not just with the wind, but with purpose. The untouched cup slowly lifted from the stone and hovered in the air. Then, like a breath being released, it gently settled back. Eli approached it, heart thudding. His grandfather. Not speaking, just watching. The tea rippled. Eli whispered, I'm here. The reflection gave the faintest nod, then faded. He didn't drink. Not yet. Eli didn't touch the third cup again. Not because he was afraid, but because he knew it wasn't meant to be finished. Not yet. The garden hushed as if in collective agreement. Even the wind stilled. Then, as if the very act of not drinking was a key in itself, the stone table began to shift. Gently, with a soft grinding sound like ancient earth stretching its arms, the stone slid apart. Beneath them, a staircase spiraled downward, carved into roots and earth, lit by tiny orbs suspended like dewdrops, glowing with quiet purpose. Eli looked at Nora. She was already holding her lantern. We go down, she said. He didn't ask how she had the lantern from Gracie's cottage again. Things like that didn't need explaining anymore. The steps were cool and moist beneath their feet, earth-scented and damp like freshly dug soil. The orbs pulsed slowly as they descended, casting light but no shadows. At the center sat a stone pedestal, and upon it, a wooden box sealed shut with a ribbon of bark. The staircase ended in a round room underground. The walls were carved with images, tea leaves, constellations, waves, birds, mid-flight. On the lid was a familiar name, etched in looping letters. For Eli, when he is ready. Eli stepped forward and placed his palm flat on the lid. The box was warm, not hot, just alive. The bark ribbon unwound on its own. Inside lay 3 things, a single tea leaf, dried and curled. A note, handwritten on thick, soft paper. A ring silver, etched with the same tree symbol from the untouched teacup. Nora leaned over to read as Eli unfolded the note, and yet brewed the most honest tea I ever tasted. Dear Elijah, if this has found you, it means the garden has chosen to open. That means you've listened not to the noise of the world, but to the whisper of your heart. There's not much I can leave you. Not gold, not land. This journey, just this tea leaf. It came from a plant that never grew straight, never followed the sun properly. Keep it. Not as a relic, but as a reminder. Some things don't need to be perfect to be miraculous. Framed by roots that curled like arches, leading toward soft daylight, Grandpa Arthur, Eli read the letter twice, then a third time, then folded it back and slipped the leaf into his pocket. I think he built all this, he said softly. Not just the shop, not just the journal, nor a touch the wall. It's a legacy. As they turned to leave, the ring in the box shimmered, and Eli slipped it onto his finger. It fit perfectly. The staircase behind them had changed. It didn't lead up anymore but forward. A new hallway stretched ahead. They stepped through the tunnel together. At the end was a clearing, and in the center cabin. It looked familiar, not because they'd been there before, but because it looked like it had been waiting for them. The clearing opened wide like a sigh, soft grasses swaying in the breeze, their tips catching afternoon light. The cabin ahead was small and round, like a teapot made of timber. Moss curved across its shingles, and tiny bluebells grew wild in clumps by the front steps. Spiced and sweet, with something earthy beneath it, all like drinking memory. There were no clocks, no calendar, just books, dried flowers, and shelves filled with jars labeled in handwriting too small to read from a distance. On one wall, a collection of old keys hung on tiny hooks, each with a note tied to its stem. A copper kettle-shaped wind chime hung beside the door and clinked a welcoming tune with each passing gust. Eli stepped onto the porch, pausing as the wood creaked gently beneath his boots. He reached for the knob, then stopped. A fire crackled in a hearth made of river stones. It shimmered faintly, the only one made of glass. There was a table already set with 2 mismatched mugs and a cat, gray with a single white sock on one paw, blinked at them from the windowsill as if to say, "You're late." In his eyes, loneliness wrapped in determination. The door opened on its own. Is this part of your grandfather's doing too? It was made of polished wood, and instead of a knob, there was a small plaque that read, inside, the cabin was warm and dim and quiet-filled with the scent of cedar, black tea, and dried oranges. Nora laughed softly. I don't know, Eli said, but it feels like him. Like all the things he never had time to say. A pen. A window looking out onto the field where stars were beginning to bloom in the sky. They entered and sat by the fire, each cradling one of the mugs. The tea was already steeped. Eli glanced around. He rose and examined them. One said, to the attic of things unsaid. Another, to the cupboard where wonder hides. But one key had no label, revealing a narrow hallway lit by warm light and lined with mirrors. He took it. The cat meowed once, hopped off the sill, and trotted to a side wall. Building towers of sugar cubes with his grandfather at the tea shop counter, he saw the day he left home, and the way his grandfather had silently handed him a wrapped package with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. There, almost invisible among the wood grain, was a door he hadn't noticed before. He inserted the key. The door opened inward, but these weren't ordinary mirrors. They didn't reflect the present. As Eli and Nora passed each one, they saw moments some real, some unfamiliar. Eli saw himself as a child, then he saw one that made him stop. His grandfather, much younger, seated alone at the edge of the same grove they had passed through days ago. In his lap, a journal. Eli whispered, "He came here too." Nora placed a hand on his shoulder. Maybe this place finds who it needs. At the end of the hallway was another door, but this one was different. If you remember, knock twice. If you forgive, knock 3 times. If you're ready, just open. Eli reached for it. His hand trembled slightly. He opened the door. Beyond it was a small room. Inside stood a table with a notebook, blank, and a teacup, empty, waiting. The room was quiet, so quiet that Eli could hear his own breath settle, like dust on still shelves. Outside the window, the world had turned the color of twilight, tea blue and purple and gold, blending where sky met earth. The table in front of him was simple, oak, old but polished. On it sat a blank notebook, a pen, and the empty teacup. No steam, no warmth, just stillness, like it was holding its breath. Eli ran a finger along the rim. She stood by the door, giving him space, her eyes soft and unreadable. She'd sensed it too. This was something only he could do. "Why does it feel like this is the most important cup I'll ever pour?" he murmured. Nora didn't answer. Eli took the pen and opened the notebook. The first page was embossed with a faint image of a tea leaf, the same twisted curl he now kept tucked in his pocket from the wooden box in the underground chamber. "I wasn't running from the world. I was waiting to find the part of you I didn't know how to carry." He began to write. Not a story, not a confession, but a letter. "You taught me how to steep tea, how to scrub a kettle with the grain, how to listen to water before it boils, but never how to miss someone when they're gone. They've shown me what you meant to leave behind, and I'm ready now to remember, to forgive, to continue." Outside, hundreds no, thousands of tiny lights were blooming across the meadow, like stars had fallen and taken root. "To the grandfather who brewed silence better than anyone I've ever known, you never taught me how to grieve. Maybe that's why I wandered so long. This place, this garden, this teacup, ... He signed it simply, Eli. The air warmed. A quiet chime rang like the final note of a song played only once, sweet but not sugary. There were notes of honey and orange peel, and something soft and green, like fresh leaves after rain. Then he folded the page and placed it inside the teacup. The moment the paper touched porcelain, something shifted. The teacup filled with steam. No kettle had poured, no leaves had steeped. Past the clouds until they disappeared into the stars, and yet the tea was there. Eli looked toward the window. Fireflies? No, memories. Each light flickered with a moment, some joyful, some painful, all true. They hovered above the grass like slow exhalations. Nora joined him. "He left this for you." Eli nodded. "And now I'll carry it forward." He lifted the cup and drank. The taste was like everything he'd forgotten and everything he wanted to remember. It was warm but not hot, and beneath it all, a note of salt. "Tears," he smiled. Outside, the firefly memories began to drift upward, rising like lanterns. They lifted past the trees, and the stars blinked back. The stars outside seemed closer than ever, bright as candle flames in the hush of evening. Eli and Nora stepped out of the cabin. The firefly memories had risen like breath into the sky, but their glow still lingered faintly in the grass, as if wonder had left behind footprints. It felt lighter than before, like the weight it once carried had lifted with the stars. Eli held the now empty teacup carefully in both hands. "Will we find the way back?" Nora asked, though her voice held no fear. "We don't need to," Eli said. "I think it'll find us." They walked through the clearing together, past the mossy trees, back through the arch of roots. The lanterns, those glowing orbs from before, floated overhead again, but this time, instead of guiding them deeper, they hovered in place like gentle witnesses. They weren't lighting a path out, they were lighting a path forward. And at the end of the tunnel, the tea shop stood again, whole, familiar, quiet. The chairs were freshly cushioned, and behind the counter, a framed photograph now hung. Eli and his grandfather, seated beside a teapot, both of them laughing with their eyes closed. You just couldn't see it until now. Not abandoned, not forgotten. For healing, for little miracles that begin in silence. The bell above the door jingled softly as they stepped inside. But the inside was different. The wooden counters gleamed. "That wasn't here before," Eli whispered. "Just steep what you feel, serve what you believe, and always let the tea do the talking." "I think it always was," Nora replied. On the counter sat a small parcel wrapped in brown paper, tied with string. Eli picked it up and untied the knot. Inside, a new journal, blank, and a letter. "Eliza, if you've come this far, then you've already begun. This shop has always been more than walls and kettles. It's been a place for listening." The warm whistle filled the room like a breath returning after a long absence. "You don't need to understand everything." With all my heart, Arthur Eli folded the letter and slid it into his pocket. He moved behind the counter, brushed his fingers across the tea tins lined in neat rows, and turned on the kettle. When he turned, Nora was sitting at one of the tables, flipping through an old poetry book with a half smile. "I'm thinking lemon verbena," she said. Eli grinned. "You always say that. It's always right." He steeped the tea. As it brewed, he walked to the front window and flipped the sign from closed to open. Outside, the first golden light of morning kissed the edge of Windfern Street. The morning rolled in like honey slow and golden, soft over cobblestones and rooftops. A breeze slipped past Windfern Street's sleepy chimneys, carrying the faintest scent of cinnamon and blooming jasmine. It had become a habit like brushing the rim of a mug with care or listening for the first pop of a kettle whistle. Little rituals that brought the world back into balance. "I heard this place was open again," she said. "Do you still have that blend, the one with orange peel and thyme?" My grandmother used to swear it made her feel 20 again. The miracle tea room stood quietly at the corner, a little crooked in the best kind of way, with ivy brushing the windows and the faint glow of lamps spilling onto the sidewalk. Eli stood behind the counter, adjusting the placement of tea tins just slightly. "We call it the second wind blend." "Let me make you a cup." "Thank you. It's been a hard year." The shop bell chimed. A woman with tired eyes and a messenger bag stepped in. Eli smiled. "Are you really the grandson of Arthur Fielding?" She asked. "My mom used to bring me here." I still remember the sound of the doorbell. Every steep, every pour, every word carried the touch of someone who had found the quiet in himself again. Watching the morning unfold through the foggy window, she handed him a napkin on which she'd scribbled a single line, and behind them the shelves of tea. "You writing fortune cookies now?" The light made the photo look almost alive. Eli brought over a small shortbread biscuit shaped like a star, but the light in the window stayed on a little longer. "On the house," he said. She blinked, surprised. "You remember? Beneath the quiet you might swear you smelled lemon verbena in the air. You might hear laughter from behind the glass. You might even believe, just for a moment, in the magic of tea and time and memory." "I think the tea does," he said, with murmurs and chuckles and the kind of laughter people forget they still have in them. The regulars returned, Mrs. Halberd with her umbrella collection, the little boy who always asked for the most mysterious tea you've got, and Nora, of course, perched near the bookshelf, sketching steam swirls in her notebook. Moments later, she was seated with a steaming mug. She looked up, eyes glossy. He nodded gently. "You're not the only one." The bell rang again and again. By mid-morning, the tea room was filled with quiet clinks and rustling pages. On the chalkboard outside, Eli had written in big, looping letters, "Today's special, small miracles served warm." Around noon, a girl wandered and holding a wrinkled flyer that had somehow made its way into her backpack. "I am," Eli said. "And you're always welcome?" He poured her a lavender chamomile and added a dash of honey from the jar labeled "Kindness," spooned liberally. As the hours passed, Eli moved between tables with a quiet rhythm, a calm in motion. And when the afternoon sun slanted through the windows just right, it hit the framed photograph above the counter Arthur and Eli, Both laughing, Nora joined him at the end of the day. The heart is a teacup, fragile but shaped to be filled. He looked at it, then back at her. She shrugged. You're the one running a magic tea shop. That night, as the last customer left and the bell gave its final ring, Eli turned the sign to closed. And if you passed by, just then beneath the lamplight, and you wouldn't be wrong. Because somewhere on a crooked corner of Windfern Street, small miracles were still being served. One cup at a time,